Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Shoulders Down. If you are listening to this the day it comes out, it is December 30th. We are almost done with 2024. And as the new year approaches, diet culture noise tends to get extra loud. The pressure to go all in and commit to a perfect diet or exercise X number of times per week is everywhere. But you already know how that story ends. You follow the plan vigilantly, and at the start of the year, you're doing good, but a few months in, you fall off the wagon and scrap the whole thing. What if you didn't have to choose between perfection and failure? What if you could find a middle ground, an approach to eating that was actually sustainable? What if you didn't have to live in this all or nothing approach? In this episode, those are some of the exact things we're going to be exploring. We're going to talk about why the all in approach is doomed to fail and why it's not your fault. We're going to talk about a reminder of what constitutes a diet, and we'll also go over some reflection questions as you think about setting food and body and health related goals for 2025. We'll go into some of the research on the sustainability of diets. And then at the end, I'll share a powerful client story for you. But before we get into it, I want to remind you that on January 16th, I am hosting a free workshop called Nourish in the New Year Without Diets. Now, this is a sort of rare occurrence for me. I don't host a lot of free workshops, but I felt called to host this workshop for the new year since it's a time when dieting noise gets especially loud. So, Nourish in the New Year Without Diets is a free event to help you break the diet cycle, escape all or nothing thinking, and achieve authentic health and food freedom in 2025. You can head to the link below or the link in the show notes to sign up. And again, it's completely free, January 16th at 4 p.m. Pacific or 7 p.m. Eastern, or convert that to whatever time zone that you are in. And if you can't join us live, you can still sign up if you're interested because you'll get the recording of the replay, but only if you register. Again, you can head to the show notes or the link below to save your spot in Nourish in the New Year Without Diets right now. Let's dive into today's episode. Let's start by chatting about why the all or nothing approach is doomed to fail and why it isn't even your fault. The all or nothing approach, as you may have experienced from your own life, is unsustainable. This black and white approach to eating and exercise keeps you riding the chaotic pendulum where you're either doing it all right or you're saying screw it and binging and not getting off the couch. And this perpetuates the cycle that ends up leading you back wanting to go all in because you feel so gross from binging and being super sedentary. But then that isn't sustainable, and you go back to the other extreme, and the cycle just keeps going that way. Does this sound familiar? If you're listening, I'm sure you have gone through something like this at some point in your journey. And the reason it isn't sustainable is because life happens. Weddings, holiday parties, unexpected pastries in the break room, travel, all of these different things that pose opportunities that are outside of your normal routine. And as humans, we're wired for survival. So when we've been through a period of restriction, which is, going all in, eating clean, being on a diet, whatever, what happens is our body registers that experience as a time when food is scarce and our survival is threatened. Now, this might sound dramatic, but our brains are very good at constantly scanning our environments for assessing risks. And one risk that our brain can find is a lack of access to energy dense foods. Now, if you're restricting things like packaged foods or breads or sweets or whatever it is, these are all energy dense foods that our body likes because we like to have access to an abundance of energy. And even if you're saying, okay, no, but Leah, like I'm not starving, like I'm still eating plenty of other foods that are allowed on my plan, that's fine. But your brain doesn't know the difference. Our brains are very sensitive to threats to our survival, and limiting foods or food groups or the amount of food that you're allowed to eat registers as a threat to your survival. And so when you inevitably end up around the foods that you've deemed off limits, again, whether this is at a wedding or a work event or when traveling, our instinct is to gorge ourselves while we have the chance before we're restricted again. This is why restriction is not sustainable and this all-in approach doesn't last because your body is working with you. It wants your survival. It registers a lot of these dieting behaviors as a threat to its survival. And you'll be swimming upstream to try to maintain this level of rigid exercising or rigid diet plan or restrictions or whatever it is. And inevitably, when you end up in a situation that's off your normal routine or when certain off-limits foods are around at a special event, what happens is your brain is going to go, oh my God, we need to get that now because we don't know if it's going to be available and again in our future. And this leads to going all in, saying, screw it, whatever. And again, the cycle perpetuates. So this doesn't work. And I'm not even going to spend that much time on this because you probably already know that it doesn't work. I want to take a moment here to go over what even constitutes a diet. So maybe you're listening to this and you're like, okay, but I'm not going to go on a diet in the new year. I'm just going to make some healthy changes or something that's seemingly benign like this. But here's the thing. You don't have to be on an official diet with a name or a rule book or an app. Your brain doesn't know the difference between an official diet and your own internalized set of food rules. It registers restriction as restriction, whether you're on a diet with an official name and cookbook and whatever, or if you are following your own set of internalized food rules, the net impact on your brain will be the same, which is the perception of restriction, which triggers a response in the brain to say, oh, this isn't good, our survival's being threatened, and this triggers fixation on food, tendencies to want to seek out more of those energy dense foods, and often leads to binging. And if you're not sure if what you're doing constitutes a diet, I have an episode called Are You on a Diet Without Knowing It? And I will link that in the show notes / description below if you want to listen. It's a quick one. It's like less than 20 minutes. So if you're like, wait a second, I didn't think what I was doing was a diet, but now I'm starting to wonder, definitely go check out that episode. Now to get to the topic of this desire to start a diet or start a certain exercise regimen in the new year. I so understand the impulse to use January 1st as a fresh start. It can be so tempting to fantasize about all the ways in which you'll radically change your eating habits and your body size in the new year. But I want to bring us back to reality for a second with the reminder that diet culture is a multi-billion-dollar industry that will take any chance to capitalize on your insecurity and vulnerability to try and profit off of you. New Year's is just another one of those inflection points that diet culture tries to use to prey on your insecurity and vulnerability. Just like the same thing often happens, when summer's coming, these kinds of messaging and marketing gets extra loud. So this is just another one of those marketing opportunities for diet culture. Before you go on another diet or health kick or lifestyle plan in 2025, I invite you to get radically honest with yourself as you sit with these 5 reflection questions that I have come up with for you. The first, in the past, when you have gone all in on a new plan, how long did it last? How did you feel during the diet? What was your mental health like? How did it impact your relationships? What happened when you stopped? Did you binge? Did you gain weight? How did it impact your mental health? Are the changes you're planning to make things that you can sustain for the rest of your life? How many diets, lifestyle plans, or health kicks have you done in the past? Have any one of them led to sustainable happiness and well-being? Keyword sustainable. So I really encourage you to either just sit with those questions and think on them or to journal on them and to get really honest with yourself. Once you do that, I also want to invite you to think about the research behind the sustainability of diets. In addition to reflecting on your own lived experience, we can take a moment to connect to the reality that 95% of diets lead to gaining back more weight than was initially lost. Comes from a really prominent meta-analysis looking at dieting attempts over a period of 5 years or more. And I will put the link to this meta-analysis in the show notes. There'll be a link to download my free research guide, and this statistic comes from one of the studies in that guide. On top of this extremely sobering fact, which is that, again, 95% of diets lead to gaining back more weight than was initially lost. Dieting is associated with negative health outcomes such as weight cycling, which is an independent risk factor for a ton of other negative health outcomes in and of itself, psychological distress, muscle atrophy, increased risk of eating disorders, social isolation, and chronic fatigue/irritability. Beyond the negative impacts on your personal, physical, and psychological health, dieting also harms our society as a collective. Diet culture perpetuates weight stigma, racism, classism, and ableism. This means that by continuing to participate in pursuits of dieting and weight loss, you are participating in a system that upholds certain bodies like thin bodies, white bodies, healthy bodies, able bodies as morally superior to fat bodies, disabled bodies, and other bodies with different marginalized identities. Is this aligned with your values? Do you want to continue subscribing to the set of values that you internalize from diet culture? Do you agree that smaller bodies are morally superior to larger ones? Do you agree that people who prioritize health deserve more respect than those who don't? If not, this can be the year that you divest from this system and start living in alignment with your own authentic values instead of the values that were handed to you by diet culture. Now, I want to share a client story to bring some tangibility to what this kind of transformation could look like, going from approaching the new year with an all or nothing mindset to approaching the new year with an intuitive mindset. So I'll read you a message that I received from this client, and then we will dissect it a little further. And for some backstory, I worked with this client in my one-to-one coaching program, the Embodied Method, which is a 4-month program. I worked with her probably 2 years ago, I think. Yeah, I think we wrapped up our work together about 2 years ago. So I'll read this message and then we'll kind of dissect it a little bit more. She said, oh, and by the way, I'm sharing this with permission. I always make sure to have consent from clients. She said, it's so unbelievably cool to move through the holidays and end of the year in a place of peace with food and my body. Before doing this work, the end of the year was defined in one of two ways. Months of irritability, fighting with myself to be good and missing out on whatever was happening around me because all I could think about was how I looked and how hungry I was. Or I was out of control and essentially on a planned binge from Halloween through January 1st. Those years tended to follow the same vicious cycle, eating to the point of feeling sick, feeling ashamed, eating more to deal with the shame, feeling sicker, and so on. I never thought it was possible to approach New Year's focused on resting, enjoying time with family, and not stressing over outfits, enjoying the desserts if I wanted to, or not if I didn't, because dessert has no power over me anymore. The freedom of knowing that January 1st is just another day and not the restart of another diet that was doomed to fail is magical. Then she said, thank you, Leah, for helping me create a more peaceful, aligned, and fulfilling holiday season. I love this message so much because I think she just really laid it out so accurately of like the two different ways this often goes. You're either quote unquote being good, but feeling extremely irritable and hangry and obsessed and fixated on your body and thinking about food and calories and therefore not engaged in the present moment of the holiday season with your loved ones, or you're saying screw it and in this client's words essentially on a planned binge from Halloween through January 1st, and that also leads to not feeling present and feeling yucky in your body and feeling shame and feeling sick. Essentially it doesn't feel good to constantly eat past comfortable fullness for weeks in a row. And then I love how she says, like, wow, it's so nice to approach January 1st as like just another day. It's not this like big day where another diet has to start and it means like you have to uproot all your habits and completely shift the way you relate to food and your body. Like, no, it doesn't have to be like that. And that just sets us up to fail because it's setting up this all or nothing mentality. And the way that this client got to this place, well, she learned about intuitive eating and gentle nutrition and self-compassion and all these things that I teach in my one-to-one coaching program. But I want those things to be accessible to more people because I know one-to-one coaching isn't accessible for everyone. And so that's why I'm teaching this workshop, Nourish in the New Year Without Diets. This client really is not a unicorn. It really is possible to get off this all or nothing roller coaster. You don't have to keep giving yourself whiplash. You can have freedom with food and confidence in your body without going on another diet on January 1st. If you want to learn how to take these steps, I invite you to register for this free workshop, Nourish in the New Year Without Diets. And to give you a little bit more information, if you're like, I don't really know if this is for me or not, this workshop is for you if you start a new diet or lifestyle plan every January, knowing it's not the answer, but unsure of what to even do instead. This workshop is for you if you've experienced that roller coaster of embarking on a diet or exercise routine only to fall off track after a few weeks and scrap the whole plan. It's also for you if you've been feeling burnt out from dieting and restriction and binging over the holidays, and you're ready to find a more compassionate way to feel better in the new year without yet another restrictive plan. This workshop is also for the person who wants to prioritize their health and well-being in 2025, but who doesn't want to fall in that trap of all or nothing thinking. When you sign up for this workshop, you will get a free 60-minute class jam-packed with education on how to kickstart your new year as an intuitive eater. There'll also be a 15-minute Q&A session with me, and then you'll get a bunch of free bonuses, different guides, a hunger fullness scale, an intuitive eating starter pack, a snack guide, all different things that you'll need to help kickstart your intuitive eating journey. And ultimately, you'll walk away from this workshop with tools to arm yourself against the tempting New Year diet culture messaging, with strategies to escape that all or nothing cycle and set yourself up to finally find lasting food freedom and body peace in 2025. And you'll also get some exercises to practice honoring your health with gentle nutrition from a place of self-care, not self-control. You can register for this free workshop and find more info via the link below / the link in the show notes. So that is all for today's episode. I really hope that this episode helped you to think a little bit more critically about how you're going to approach the new year and hopefully have some compassion for yourself that, the reason it hasn't worked in the past when you've set up these big goals starting January 1st isn't your fault. It's because the all or nothing mentality is literally doomed to fail and it's not sustainable. I so hope you'll join us for this workshop so that I can teach you a different approach, a more compassionate and balanced approach in terms of how to relate to food in your body as we approach the new year. So again, one last encouragement to head to the link in the show notes and sign up for this free workshop. I would absolutely love to get to support you if you are someone who struggled with this all or nothing cycle around New Year's. That is all for today's short mini episode. I figured I would just pop in such a weird time, the time between Christmas and New Year's. It's like, what day is it? Where am I? I have no idea. So I figured I would just come in here with a little episode for you. And if you have any questions, if there's anything that you're wanting support on, you can email me at leah@leahkernard.com, and I'd love to connect with you. That is all for today. I hope you have a beautiful new year, and I'll talk to you in our next episode.